Pasang, we can tell by your surname Sherpa that you're from the Himalaya, and in particular you're from a particular region near Everest, the Khumbu region, I think I'm right in saying. And we can already see in the Khumbu region the effects of climate change on the Himalaya.
Yeah, because the climate change in Nepal was adversely seen there, because our glaciers are melting, and then especially the ice on the mountains are melting down, and the people are really scared because all the lakes are growing and growing, and we never know when it's going to burst out. So we can clearly see there is really adverse impact on the mountains. But at the same time, if you see in the hill areas and the plain area, they are the one where indigenous people living there, whether it's a mountain area, whether it's a hill area or the plain area, all area, the most affected peoples are the indigenous peoples.
And your particular focus is the RED program in Southeast Asia. Tell us a bit about what you get up to and why is it so important that forestry is managed sustainably in Nepal?
Yeah, in Nepal, we are really focusing on the engagement and the involvement and full and effective participation of indigenous peoples in the sector of forestry, because forest is very related with the indigenous people. And forest is, we have a symbiotic relation, not just only for, just for the livelihoods, but also the spiritual values, our connectedness with the forest. So whenever there is any kind of policy programs or any kind of changes regarding forestry, that will have a negative adverse impact on the indigenous people's lives, spiritual values, our connectedness, our ancestral land. So that is one of the reasons we are focusing on in the national level, in the local level, in the community level, that whenever the policies, programs, or any kind of measures, like adopted measures or mitigation measures, indigenous people's engagement, full and effective participation, particularly respecting indigenous people's rights, enshrined by these different international treaties, national conventions, international conventions, obligations should be secured and respected for securing the indigenous people's rights.
And when we think about Nepal, we think about one huge country with the huge Himalayas, but it's also a country which has many indigenous peoples. You were telling me just now there are almost 120 separate languages. So how important is it that all those cultures are preserved?
It's very important to preserve these indigenous people's languages, culture, traditions, because indigenous people's values and our customary practices are very eco-friendly, and the different research, and if you see in the ground level, our traditional practices are been very has symbiotic relation, have been contributing for the sustainable management of the forest. So preserving our multilingual diversity, cultural diversity is in a way of preserving the diversity, biodiversity of the whole nation.
Absolutely, and we look at the RED program in Nepal. Which areas are you working in, and how important is it that the forests are maintained, not simply to give people firewood, but also to maintain the structure of the hillsides to stop landslides when it rains heavily?
Yeah, we are working with the RED programs in Nepal, particularly with the forestry sectors, because we are really giving emphasis on the indigenous people's cultural values to be respected, inclusion in the RED programs and policies, because we have clearly it's been shown in the research, and we can see the real daily practices in the ground level. Indigenous values are really preserving for the forest and helping for the sustainable management of the forest. So whenever we do the RED programs, RED strategies, national RED strategies, or local level policy program in relation to the RED, in recognition of indigenous traditional practices means that emphasize and for the sustainable management of the forest, and in that way means like we'll implement the RED effective way.
And a final question, give us an idea of how bad the scale of deforestation is in Nepal. Obviously, you've recently come out of a hugely damaging 13-year civil war, so it hasn't been the best time for a coherent governance from the state level, but give us an idea of how bad deforestation is at the moment and your targets for the next 5 to 10 years.
The state of the deforestation is very high in Nepal. That is clear because you can see it. But the problem is like the whole the reasons of the high deforestation rate is for not hand over our ancestral lands to the indigenous peoples, because indigenous peoples' land are all snatched away by this government's forestry and land policies of since they revised and then since they worked with these policies after 1952 in Nepal, because all our collective rights that has been been contributing for the sustainable management of forest is all snatched away. It's all nationalized, no? So that has been one of the main reasons for high deforestation, because the ownership feeling is not there. Like different research has shown, like especially in the national forestry, is a high deforestation rate in comparison to the community forestry. It's because of, like in national forestry, is all the imposition of the government, the rules and regulation, and not recognizing the indigenous people's own traditional values. So that has been one of the main drivers of deforestation, is not recognizing indigenous people's rights. So that is one of the reasons we have been advocating, we have been lobbying with the government, how important for them to understand indigenous people's cultural values and rights, to be secure for the sustainable management of forests and for the effective implementation of RED, and for us to live healthy environment in the future.